Hi, folks. Meteorologist Michael Wilhite here with SouthernIndianaWeather.com. Thanks for logging on to the 2015-2016 preliminary winter forecast. Oh boy, here we go. We've got a lot to talk about tonight, folks. Outlooks are already out. Farmer's Almanac, snowfilled and frigid for our area. Supposedly, if you believe the Farmer's Almanac, excuse me. If you go to the old Farmer's Almanac, cold and snowy for our area, and you can see quite a bit of a variation between the two. Well, what should you believe? What should you not? I want to talk about what we know right now, and of course, a lot of the unknowns as well. I've got my thoughts already issued on the site. Go to SouthernIndianaWeather.com under winter 2015-16 preliminary winter forecast. I've got a little discussion written up. I'm going to be adding this video to the bottom of that once I get this recorded there. So go to that and you'll be able to get a little bit more details. Before we get there, just real quick as an update here, I'm recording this August the 25th here. We got a hurricane brewing out in the season, hurricane area. Hurricane Erica is really spinning up there. In fact, as I put the satellite on here, there you can see it, and it looks like right now it could be taking aim at the east coast towards Florida, potentially as maybe a Category 1, 2, or 3 hurricane, depending on the models. Folks, that is something that I'll be keeping an eye on over the coming days. You can see here that the latest analysis from the National Hurricane Center will take it as a hurricane potentially by next Sunday, right through the Bahamas and knocking on the door. So this is something that we're going to have to keep an eye on. Hurricane models here, the different ones all over, anywhere from a landing, in the Gulf. Right now, most of the models are either recurving it or taking it right on. So it's something that we're going to have to watch close, and of course we'll keep an eye on that. That's about all we can say. If the Hurricane Wharf model is right, you can see it's got an eye right on Florida at about 126 hours from this model, and it's a pretty impressive looking hurricane. So again, we'll keep an eye on it. All right, now let's talk about the topic at hand. Let's talk about the preliminary winter forecast. And as you can see right now, the first thing we need to take a look at is an El Nino. You've probably heard about this being, well, this is the Godzilla El Nino, or it was the Bruce Lee El Nino. There's been so many ridiculous titles out there with this, and I understand that because this is one of the strongest El Ninos we've ever had, so they're trying to find a way to describe it and communicate it to the public. But the reality is we don't want the hype along with this, and that's the problem with it. I don't believe in hyping my forecast. I've used a very scientific method to come up with my forecast. They are what they are. I don't need to hype them up. So here we go. Here's what we've got. First off, we need to talk about the El Nino. El Nino is an unusual warming in the waters off of the coast of South America. So if we just sort of take a look at it right here, this is what we would say is our El Nino. And so these unusually warm waters all over this, that's your El Nino. And the stronger your El Nino, the more of an effect it has on our winter season. Right now, here we are at the end of August, and you can see we've got a pretty strong El Nino. We're very close to a 2.0, not quite there yet, but just very close to it. And you can see it's peaked, it's progged to peak here somewhere around November before it falls off in intensity over the winter months. That's unusual. El Ninos typically strengthen during the winter months rather than the fall months, so this is kind of an unusual setup that we haven't seen before. We'll see how this plays out. But the bottom line is we're going to have a strong El Nino all throughout the winter again. Now let's talk about that, because as I said, El Ninos are typically a cold signal, a warm signal. There are several things in sea surface temperatures that we look for when we're forecasting winter weather, folks, because part of the reason why is because sea surface temperatures change a lot less than surface temperatures change. Water temperatures, as you know, they don't lose heat as fast as air temperatures do, and so especially if we have a lot of warm water over the months, that can still continue to fuel storms as we go into the winter season. So let me give you a few of the things that we look at. Of course, the first right here that I would say is this El Nino, and of course this is a warm signal. These warm waters off the coast of South America are typically a very warm signal, but they're not the only thing that we look at. We also look at these warm waters right here off the coast in the Gulf of Alaska. This is something that's been there for about 2 years now, and these warm waters are largely what is responsible for our very cold winters that we have had the past 2 winters. Notice they are still firmly in place there. So that's another cold signal. Warm waters right here off the Baja Peninsula, Southern California, that's typically when we see those coming into wintertime. That's also a cold signal. Colder waters here off the into the mid-Pacific Ocean starting to come in typically is another cold signal as you look into the climatology. And then especially this up here in the Iceland area as we see these cold waters off of the course of Iceland and these warmer waters near Greenland up here. Folks, what you got here are very cold signals. Now, if you just do the math here, add them up, what do you see? You see more cold signals than you do warm signals, right? You got one up here, these two kind of working together as one cold signal. There's a second cold signal, there's a third cold signal, there's a fourth cold signal, and you've got maybe one warm signal working for you down here. So as we sort of talk about this, what we see is then how big of an influence is this El Nino going to be? Because if we've got all of these other cold signals working in our favor, is the El Nino is going to have to be a major influence to sort of overcome that. Here's the other thing you need to know about El Nino. When you get El Ninos that are what we call west base, or excuse me, east base, in other words, they are stronger here off the coast of South America than they are in the central portions, that's a warm signal. But once they start to spread out and we get a little bit cooler at the course of South America and they spread and they become more of a warm waters here over the central portions of the Nino regions, and that can become a colder signal for us here. That is exactly what you're seeing as if you just take a look at the temperature change over the past 7 days. You're starting to see little spots of warmer water come out here. You're starting to see some cooler water well up there along the coast, and you can see it is starting to become a little bit more central base. That could be a potential cooler signal for us this winter. So that's something that we're going to have to keep an eye on very strongly as we go throughout this. Now, let's talk then about this, specifically about snow. Because after all, snow is what everyone wants to know about, right? El Nino winters have typically run the gamut for us, all right? So the last moderate El Nino we had was 2009 and 10. We got 15.3 inches of snow. These are all for the Evansville International Airport there, Evansville Regional Airport, rather, in southern Indiana, all right? So we got 15.3 inches here. We got 20.8 at the last one prior to that, the one in 97-98. By the way, that was a very warm year overall, but we still ended up with 20 inches of snow. Very high totals. 91-92 though, look at this. We only ended up with 3 inches of snow. A little over 7 inches there for these past two. 3 inches, 6 inches, 13.9, 16.2, 9.0. These are all the strong and moderate El Ninos that we have had over the history of our recording these El Ninos. And what you can see is it runs the gamut. You could go from famine to feast pretty easily with this. So predicting snow totals, not an easy thing with the El Nino. But the good news is we've got plenty of other warm signals, or cold signals rather, that mix in with the thing. So we're not dealing just entirely with an El Nino winter. This is not going to be a typical El Nino winter. If it were a typical El Nino winter, what we could say is these big totals here are more of a fluke than anything. They came in one big event in most cases rather than, and we just had little tiny amounts of snow over the end. They were still pretty warm winters. But there were some winters that weren't quite that way. In fact, one of the ways that I forecast, folks, as I go back through all of these El Nino winters and I say, okay, I'm going to look at the sea surface temperatures like this, and I want to say then, what El Nino winters have we had historically in the past that have had warm waters here in a similar location to this El Nino, that had warm waters in the Gulf of Alaska, that might have had those cooler waters off of the south of Greenland and Iceland up here? Well, what are those winters? And as I look at those winters, what I do is I find out of these particular winters, I find 3 of them in particular that stand out as what I would call an analog year. We'll call these analog years as just a year that we can compare to. I can make temperature maps then based off of those analog years and give me an idea of what might happen this winter based off of what's historically happened in the past. It's a really cool way to forecast. So let me just take you through this. 1957-58, 1986-87, and 2002-2003. Those were the analog years that compared the best. By the way, if you just kind of go back to here, 57, 86, and 2002. Let me get the right one here, folks. 57, 58, we had 9 inches. 86, 87, 7.5 inches. And 02, 03, we had 20.8 inches. So again, we didn't have any low snow totals here with those. we had reasonable totals. Normal for Evansville is just over 10 inches of snow, by the way. So these two were just slightly below normal, but not by much, well above normal for this. Let's talk about then the El Nino. Let's talk about what the effect these El Ninos had on our fall and then into the upcoming winter, just based off of these analogs. You average those three out, here's what you come up with. The warmer shades here are above normal, cooler shades below normal. So what we see is as we head into September of that year, we ended up having quite above normal, really by about 2 degrees above normal when you average out over the month. And what you see here, by the way, averaging these out, this is saying we're taking all the days from September 1 all the way to September 30, and we're comparing them with normal, and then we're seeing, how far above normal. You get an average for the month, and then you can compare that average temperature that you had for the month to the average normal temperature for the month and how far above or below it does. Pretty simple, really. We had a pretty well above normal September. All right. October switched, though. We had a cooler than normal October. We had a cooler than normal November. In fact, it was significantly cooler for this midsection out here of the country. By the time we went into December, it started to switch back. December started off pretty mild. We had a fairly normal to above normal here around the area and well above normal as you head out. Then a switch occurred again. By the time January came, the winter started to kick in, and then February came, and then the whole eastern half of the country got really well below normal. March, it let up just a little bit, but you see it kind of switched sides on where it was, but we were still a little bit below normal here in parts of southern Indiana, and we finally started to get in some relief as April started to kick in. So if the analogs are right, then what can we say? Well, we would expect, if the analogs are right, a warmer than normal September, October, and November would be below normal, warming back up to above normal to near normal for December, January, February below normal, and then starting to get a little bit more normalcy as you head into March and April after that. Let's look right now at the modeling. What do we see? We're in a cool snap right now. It's April 25th, April 25th. It's August 25th as I'm recording this, folks, and right now our high temperature today was in the mid-70s. It was beautiful outside. Models forecasted 78. We did not hit that. In fact, we're going to hit probably upper 70s. I think these models are a little bit too warm the next couple of days before we warm up for the weekend. But look at this. We're starting to go in a very warm above normal pattern. And as you head into the beginning of September, you're already seeing a return to near 90 degrees when our normal should be about 86, 87 and falling as we head through the month of September. So we're starting to see that above normal pattern as we head into the beginning of September. So could the analogs be starting to verify already? As I said, folks, at the beginning of this video, this is my preliminary winter forecast. It's not my final thoughts yet. What I'm going to do is over the next couple of months, as I see September and October pan out, do they pan out as the analogs are saying? If they do, that's a good indication that these analogs may be on the right track for what we're going to see the rest of the year. Of course, I've got other things that I'm going to be looking at. The extent of Siberian snow cover during the month of October always factors into my final forecast and things like that as well, but there's much more to come here, folks. But the bottom line is this is a start on the data for you. If you want my thoughts right now, I think that this winter is looking a little bit cooler than normal. Now, is it going to be snow-filled and frigid, as the Farmer's Almanac says? I'm not going to go there yet. Again, El Ninos can be very tricky to forecast snow. I think in my preliminary winter outlook, if you go to southernindianaweather.com again, go to the winter tab, click on preliminary winter forecast there, that link, and you can see that at the bottom of that. I go through and I explain this a little bit more along with some of the modeling. And what you see is I forecasted about a 75 to 125% of normal. That seems reasonable to me right now. But again, I will fine-tune that. I have nice graphics and everything out, but that will not come out until November, folks. This is just the preliminary winter forecast. The other thing I can say pretty confidently right now is I do think wild temperature swings are likely for our area. Again, December probably starts out mild like last year. The further we go into the winter, the rougher the temperature swings becomes. Going back through the historical records on some of these years, it was not uncommon to see days in the 60s followed by days in the 20s for 2 or 3 days and back into the 50s. That's a pretty wild temperature swing that can wreak havoc on our sinuses. I realize that's the kind of winter things are looking at right now as we see in the analogs. Will that hold true or not? over the next couple of months, folks, I'm going to be doing a little bit more research trying to give us some insight in towards this. So keep it tuned here to southernindianaweather.com. Will Hite WX on YouTube, at SouthernINWX on Twitter, Southern Indiana Weather on Facebook, and southernindianaweather.com for the website, folks. And I will keep you up to date. Final winter forecast comes out around November the 1st, so just keep it tuned for that. All right, folks, that is it. Thanks for watching the preliminary winter forecast. I'm meteorologist Michael Wilhite with southernindianaweather.com. Have a great night, folks, and we'll see you with final winter forecast in November. Be sure, by the way, to keep it tuned every week for long-range forecasts twice a week.